Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Kristi Noem stands her ground, and rightfully so, when the mainstream media is grasping at straws trying to blame her for the Texas flooding. Let's dive in.
When was the request put in, and when did you approve it? And is this accurate that there's this $100,000 sign-off that you have to do?
The $100,000 sign-off is for every contract that goes through the Department of Homeland Security.
So you did implement
that's
that policy.
It's an accountability on contracts that go forward, but there was no break in contracts. Those contracts were approved as soon as they were in front of me, and FEMA knew they were fully to deploy the instant that the local officials asked for the request.
When did you get the request for these search and rescue teams and other resources?
They were immediately responded.
What
yes,
day?
And
though?
everyone
Because
will tell you.
According to reports, they didn't arrive
and the
until
governor will say, well, this is what I think
Tuesday.
is really unfortunate, is that we have a situation where so many individuals are playing politics with what happened to Texas. And the governor and the emergency responders on the ground, the mayor of that city, the judge in that county who has some authority over emergency response, every one of them said, as soon as we asked for help, they were here. The federal government was here. And we didn't just deploy FEMA. We deployed our Coast Guard and BORTAC teams. Border Patrol was amazing. Every single agency that we had was there helping as many individuals as we possibly could. And that's what I think is remarkable. It's a very different response, I think, from the federal government we've ever seen in a disaster like this, because we had so many different agencies immediately respond, and that's the way that it should be.
I do want to talk big picture in just a moment, but the New York Times is reporting that thousands of calls from flood victims to FEMA call centers went unanswered in the middle of this ongoing disaster because you didn't renew contracts to keep call center staff in place until nearly 1 week after the floods. Why did it take so long to extend those contracts?
It's just false. Those contracts were in place.
It didn't take 5 days?
No employees were off of work. Every one of them was answering calls. So false reporting, fake news, and it's discouraging. It's discouraging that during this time when we have such a loss of life and so many people's lives have turned upside down, that people are playing politics with this because the response time was immediate. And if you talk to anyone in Texas that was there, that was a part of this operation, they would say the federal government and President Trump immediately responded.
Just to be very clear, on July 7th, 15.9% of calls were answered. I mean, does that concern you that only 15% of calls were answered? These are people in a desperate state. FEMA, often the first call that they make, only 15% were answered on July 7th, several days after the floods.
These contracts were in place, and those people were in those call centers, and they were picking up the phone and answering these calls from these individuals. So that report needs to be validified. I'm not certain it's accurate, and I'm not sure where it came from. And the individuals who are giving you information out of FEMA, I'd love to have them put their names behind it, because the anonymous attacks to politicize this situation is completely wrong. I care. These emergencies need to be conducted exactly how President Trump handled this one. It was that the local responders are the ones who execute the response. The state comes in and manages it, and then the federal government comes in and supports it. And as soon as Texas asked for anything, we were there.
Just very quickly, I mean, disasters often cost millions, if not billions of dollars. You've acknowledged there is this policy you implemented to sign off on contracts that exceed $100,000. Why add extra red tape when there is a crisis of this magnitude?
It's not extra red tape. It's making sure everything is getting to my level and that it's immediately responded to. This was not slowed down at all. In fact, it was much more responsive. If you remember, I was there. I was standing right there long before this report ever came out, and people were asking, and we were granting permission in real time. So the false reporting has been something that is inappropriate, and it's something that I think we need to clear up, and that this response was by far the best response we've seen out of FEMA, the best response we've seen out of the federal government in many, many years, and certainly much better than what we saw under Joe Biden.
Two more quick ones on FEMA, then we need to get to deportation. Senator Elizabeth Warren is calling for you to resign. Your response, is there any chance you would resign?
No, there's not, and I hadn't heard that, but, I don't care what she thinks.
And right you are, Kristi, you shouldn't care what Senator Warren has to say, or a whole bunch of other Democrats who are calling for her to resign because of how she's handling ICE. And no, that's exactly why I want her in. And as it turns out, as I was researching this story, this one took a while to look into, because there's something fishy going on. And it's not because of what's being reported, it's what's not being reported. I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I got to talk about the $100,000 contract thing. Kristi Noem has her own policy that any contract that's going to cost over $100,000 has to pass by her desk, and she's going to give it a good hard look. For someone who is in charge of FEMA, that's a fantastic idea. Hey, y'all, here's the deal. Gold loves President Trump. Under Trump's first term, the price of gold soared 53%, and the price of silver jumped 51%. Since the start of the second term, gold has skyrocketed even higher, breaking records and even outperforming stocks. Here's what I like about precious metals like gold and silver. They have been used as a store of value for centuries. Governments can't easily manipulate it. They are used as hedges against market risk and, of course, against inflation. That's why I partnered with the amazing people over at Goldco. Goldco is an award-winning precious metals company. They are fans of this show, and they have helped millions of Americans just like y'all to purchase over $3 billion in gold and silver. Right now, you can get a free copy of their 2025 gold and silver kit. On top of that, you might also qualify for their amazing unlimited silver bonus offer. So don't wait on this. Go to politibrawlgold.com to learn more. That's politibrawlgold.com or call 855-644-GOLD. I think she might need to up the scale, but I don't really know how those contracts work. I do know how they are negotiated. Contracts are negotiated between multiple parties. Sometimes a contractor will come in and try to highball in order to get more money than what they actually need. And Kristi Noem might call him back and say, "Hey, can we lower this by about $20,000 and then we got ourselves a deal?" Oh, you say no? Well, I'll go with this other one that's threatening to undercut you, but you did it last time, so I want to give you the benefit. That's how these sort of negotiations end up going. And that's a good thing for someone in her position to do. So when the floods occurred on July 4th in the Guadalupe River out in the hill country of Texas, the FEMA response so far was actually pretty darn good. And here's what the New York Times had to say about the issue. And a New York Times report Friday found that the agency laid off hundreds of call center contractors in the middle of the crisis July 5th. We'll get to that. After answering well over 99% of the calls coming its way on that day, FEMA responded to just 35.8% and 15.9% of calls over the following 2 days, respectively. In other words, the contracts ended on July 5th. Okay? That's the day a whole lot of those contracts ended. The day after major flooding. And so what will happen in these contract negotiations is they'll come in and say, "Hey, you really need us. There's a problem going on. We're going to squeeze you out of more money." And Kristi Noem wasn't allowing that. On one hand, I really appreciate that. And see, the reason I'm saying that's been left out of the reporting is because I've read the New York Times article itself, and it's coy on the details. There's no actual reasons from Noem's camp as to why the contracts expired or weren't immediately renewed. There's no explanation back and forth. There's no one from those contractors saying that, "Hey, we were stonewalled." The New York Times should have looked to those areas, and the fact that those don't show up in the report, that's what tells me that there's more to this story. That's my theory on the issue, but I hope more of the truth comes out here. But ultimately, the idea of having her look at every single contract over $100,000, that's good for business because we have seen FEMA just fumble the ball over and over and over again. I am just young enough to be politically conscious in 2005. I was about 12 years old, and I remember what happened at Katrina. When the levees broke because Katrina hit them dead center, put enough pressure on the levees that they basically collapsed and flooded all of New Orleans, or at least a whole big chunk of it. And the reason this was a problem was because the governor and mayor, both Democrats at the time, remember the South wasn't fully Republican until about the early 2010s. But the state legislatures, the governorship, and the mayor of New Orleans had the opportunity to get people out of New Orleans and just refused. They refused the opportunity, and it took forever for FEMA to get in there. Guess who got blamed? That's right, George W. Bush and FEMA got blamed, and the American people haven't forgiven FEMA ever since. And they almost had forgotten about it until last year when Hurricane Helene collided into another low-pressure system, funneled up all this rain, and it dumped it on the Great Smoky Mountains and the Piedmont area of western North Carolina and just devastated the place. And it took forever for FEMA to go out and respond to any of it. As a matter of fact, they were so bad at it that the Amish were coming in and were rebuilding things faster than FEMA could. Because FEMA didn't have the resources, FEMA didn't care, and FEMA had voluntarily transferred money that had been allocated to their department to help Alejandro Mayorkas mess around with other projects that should have been going to FEMA because it was the middle of hurricane season in a La Nina event. This doesn't make any sense for that to happen in western North Carolina. And FEMA was that bad at its job. They're not having this logistical problem out there in Texas right now. There are people out there trying to help pick up the pieces as fast as they can. And yet the Democrat Party and the mainstream media are latching onto one part of 1% of a story that contracts had let slip, and that means less people were able to call into FEMA. I'm sorry, that does not compare to the failures of Katrina or western North Carolina, and the Democrats are now calling for Kristi Noem to resign over this? This isn't a good look. I can admit that. To allow these contracts to expire right when the floodwaters are happening, that's usually when Kristi Noem needs to quickly get back into the office, make a couple of quick phone calls, see if she can negotiate something on the cheap rather than letting them expire. But you know what? Considering how FEMA has responded to this disaster, I think this is a drop in the bucket. Having some contracts expire for people to take phone calls, that's not the story that the mainstream media thinks it is, and no one's really buying it. That's the reality, folks. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Am I off base in thinking that this is really about contract negotiations? But seriously, let me know what you think down in the comments below. My name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.